All right, about 10 more seconds. Allow people to come in and find your seats, and we'll get going here. Good morning, or afternoon, I should say. It is past noon. It's been quite a week, but I am pleased to welcome you back to the 2024 edition of Capital Clarity. Every day, every Thursday during the session, you can find us here or across the hall at the Lincoln Auditorium, as the schedule permits, to hear from elected officials, lawmakers, activists, other involved parties. You know, when I was working with IFF last year, I'm Brian Allman. You can find my stuff at gemstatechronicle.com, by the way. But when I was with IFF last year, Capital Clarity was my favorite thing to do because it is a wonderful event that brings people and the government together. Sometimes it seems like there's a wall there between elected officials, government officials, bureaucrats, and regular people, voters, constituents, taxpayers. And Idaho has been so great about not having that wall. And programs like this really break down that barrier, allow you to talk to your elected officials in person, hear what they have to say, share what you have to say. And that's what a representative republic is all about. So when Ron Nate asked me to come back and help with this event, I was extremely excited. This is an incredible thing. So, as you know, this is the first week of the 2024 legislative session. They started on Monday with the governor's address. He laid out his vision for what he wants to see happen. And a lot of that vision involved how he's going to spend taxpayer dollars. He proposed his budget to fund state agencies and other programs to, fix roads and bridges and do all those things. Well, the folks who you're going to hear from today have, maybe a different vision, a different starting point, a different perspective when it comes to what the purpose of government is and how taxpayer dollars should be spent. So the people you hear from today will be the new president of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, Ron Nate, Fred Birnbaum, the legislative affairs director and budget expert. And then at the end, we'll hear from Senator Tammy Nichols and Representative Heather Scott, who are the co-chairs of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. Now, contrary to what you might read in the media, those are actually two different things. Idaho Freedom Foundation is a think tank and policy center that advocates for liberty and freedom, whereas the Freedom Caucus is an organization of legislators who support similar principles, but they are separate. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce the president of Idaho Freedom Foundation, Ron Nate.
Thank you, and thank you, Brian, for the kind introduction. I'd like to thank Fred for being here too. He'll give you some great budget information, stuff that you didn't hear in the House chamber a few days ago, but very important to you, I'm sure. I'd like to start out by, first of all, acknowledging the big shoes that I fill in taking the president position at Idaho Freedom Foundation. Wayne Hoffman has done masterful work in starting and building an organization, and he leaves a great legacy of advocating and promoting freedom in Idaho. All Idahoans owe him a big thank you for the work that he's done, and I feel the weight of that as I go forward, knowing that that legacy needs to continue and to elevate as we go on if we are going to save our great state. So would you join me in thanking Wayne? He's not here today, but a round of applause I think is totally appropriate. I'd also like to acknowledge that Capital Clarity was only begun a few years ago. Representative Dorothy Moon and Lieutenant Governor Janice McGeehan started this, and now Dorothy Moon is the Idaho GOP chair, and she is here today, so she deserves a round of thanks too for starting this. Yeah. Thank you, Dorothy. And this falls on us now to continue. Senator Nichols has been helpful in organizing these for the past few years, and she's here today, and so we owe her some thanks too. But woo, yeah. Okay. We have work to do. And I don't just mean the Idaho Freedom Foundation. I mean everyone in this room, everyone in Idaho who champions freedom. America is in peril, and Idaho is in peril. I don't know if many of you have seen the Rocky Mountain heist, but it's a very interesting video of how a red state, Colorado, was turned blue and turned shockingly blue in just a few years because maybe of a lack of vigilance on the part of those who value freedom. Maybe a lot of influx of money that was influencing people to vote the wrong way or to do the wrong things. They are trying that here. There is a lot of money flowing around the Idaho Capitol and the capital of Boise to try and beat the conservative message. Many legislators, many, not all, many legislators are woefully out of touch with what it means to be a conservative. They'll say they're conservatives. They might even believe it in their heart that they're a conservative, but their actions don't match with what they say or what they believe. They don't understand the concept of freedom. I want to say this, government handouts do not lead to freedom. A government handout creates slaves of both the taxpayer who the money's being taken from and the recipient of that money. So freedom rarely, if ever, maybe never, comes from a government program. Unless the government program protects rights, you're not getting freedom from another government program. Usually you're getting taxes, more regulations, and a loss of freedom. Rights are being diminished and taken away. Taxes and budgets are out of control. The governor is not a conservative. He's been a puppet for special interests, and you can just look at how his votes and his programs line up with the IACI plan for Idaho. We've got $22 billion over the last few years from COVID relief. That's federal money coming into Idaho. That money's either borrowed or printed or taxed from you. It's not conservative to be dependent on the federal government. Governor Little's budget is not conservative. He claims it's 2.2% increase. Fred Birnbaum's going to tell you what it really means. That if we look at the actual spending, you get a very different picture. Beyond the fiscal, we have social problems too. Woke culture is attacking our families and our kids. Libraries have horrible books in them. When I was a kid, I remember the librarian was your friend. The librarian was an ally to parents. But it feels like today the librarians are more interested in defending themselves for holding books and stuff that might be damaging to your kids than they are really about caring for your kids. I'm not saying all librarians, but I'm saying a lot of them, including the library establishment, seems to not be fighting for your kids' well-being. We need to work to make sure our policy matches the family values of Idaho. Schools have become indoctrination centers. They ask kids for their pronouns. They have sex ed classes that go against the values of Idaho families. Books, bathrooms, travel policy, all are in question. These were never even an issue when I was a kid. Schools were places of education, not indoctrination. We have drag queen events. We have lip syncs, story hours in our public libraries, pride events in the park being subsidized with state dollars in some cases. The woke culture wants us to, quote, be kind. But while they attack our kids, are they being kind? We need to watch out for our kids. We have lost freedoms. There's relics of the COVID pandemic and the government's response to it. They closed businesses, they closed churches. Should government ever be closing businesses and closing churches? No. Should they? No, thank you. Our state sovereignty is at risk as we rely more and more on the federal government. Medicaid, for example, Common Core. Once we instituted Common Core and adopted that curriculum, when we wanted to get rid of it, the federal government threatened to take away other funding. And once you adopt the federal program, it is almost impossible to get rid of it. That's why you need courageous legislators like a lot of those in this room who are here and who have supported freedom agendas. The state government is also expanding beyond just being reliant on the federal government. We have Idaho Launch expanding. The career and technical education expanded beyond what it was. Rural nurses programs where you actually have government paying for nurses. More and more state programs are putting more and more people on the government payroll. And as this becomes a government economy, it's a lot different than a market-based economy where you have competition driving efficiency instead of government and bureaucrats driving inefficiency and just trying to grow their budgets. The governor's wish list 3 days ago has huge spending increases. Didn't hear anything about tax cuts. He tried to say that there'd be property tax relief, but that only came by spending other tax dollars for school facilities. That's a tax shift. That's not a tax cut. There was no discussion of tax cuts. There's a lot of extra money floating around in our budgets. There's a lot of money that he plans to spend that could be going back to families as the change on their overpayment of taxes. I tried to be very careful as a legislator that I resisted calling them tax revenues because it made it sound like government earned those somehow. I call them tax collections because it is done by force, right? The governor says he's a Republican, and therefore, in the State of the State address, whenever he would say one of his new programs, you saw a lot of the Republicans, not all of them, but a lot of the Republicans just become bobbleheads. Yes, governor. Yes, governor. Yes, governor. If that was a Democrat governor up there saying exactly the same thing, you would have seen Republicans pushing back against it. But because he has an R next to his name, somehow it becomes okay to hear all these liberal policies, no discussion of the taxes being overburdening Idaho families, and we have a lot of Republican bobbleheads saying, yes, governor, yes, governor. We need to push back. Not just acting like automatons, clapping for everything he proposes. Many of you are familiar with one of Ronald Reagan's famous quotes. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read the part that is often not read too. Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same." And here's the part that's often not read. "Or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it was once like in the United States where men were free." A lot of you in this room are old like me. Think about your childhoods. Think about, did it feel freer in your childhood than it does today? Think about getting on an airplane. What kind of experience is that? When you were a kid, did you ever get on an airplane? What did you learn in school? Did you learn that America was evil, or did you learn America was great? Did you pledge allegiance to the flag? Did you learn an honest history of America, or one that's tainted by critical race theory? Did you ever run a lemonade stand? Did you ever run a little business mowing lawns or whatever? Senator Nichols has a bill to free youth businesses from local municipal laws or tax policies. It's a little saddening we have to pass a state law to preserve that freedom. You usually don't have to pass laws to preserve freedom. You just have to have government stay out of your hair. The price of gasoline when you were a kid, when I was a kid. Did you know the tax on a gallon of gasoline today is 32 cents at the state level, 18 at the federal level, 50 cents a gallon? When I was a kid, the price of gas was lower than 50 cents a gallon. Now the tax alone is higher than what we used to pay. Do you feel freer? Okay. Private charity, not government handouts, was mainly the way we helped our neighbors in our communities and our families. Government handouts, government programs pervert that whole system. They make it compulsory on the taxpayer. They make it conditional on the recipient. And neither party feels great about that. But when it's personal, when it's spiritual, you can feel good as being a giver. You can feel humble as being a recipient and commit to helping others in the future. Government takes that away. it steals virtue from what is otherwise a very generous event. The Idaho Freedom Foundation is going to continue its work, elevate its work to preserve and honor freedoms in Idaho. We need your help to do that. I'll just remind you, the Idaho Freedom Index is a great tool for educating you on what your representatives and senators are actually doing. It uses 12 metrics to rate bills in terms of their freedom, in terms of whether it limits government or expands government, adds new programs or takes away programs, raises taxes, lowers taxes, honors the Constitution or doesn't honor the Constitution. We have 12 metrics. We rate the bills. Then the legislators vote on the bills. The legislators determine their own grade, their own ranking based on how they vote. All the IFF does is report those votes and report those rankings. And the IFF takes a lot of heat from it, but you know what? We also get a lot of praise for it. There's a lot of other states who I've heard from who would love to have a metric like that in their states. This is the gold standard of judging. Is judging the right word? Assessing how your legislators are doing. But I want Idahoans to be able to cast informed votes in elections. So please understand how your legislators behave, understand how candidates for office would square up on a freedom index. I don't want to talk too long. We have Fred Birnbaum that's here to talk about the budget specifically, maybe give a bit of a response to the governor's State of the State address. And so I'll turn the floor over to him. He's one of the best analysts I've ever met in my whole life. He is just, give him a spreadsheet and you'll lose him for hours because he'll pick it apart. So Fred, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Fred Birnbaum. Ron, thanks for the generous introduction. And we are excited to have Ron. He's a PhD economist as our new president. I struggle sometimes with how do you make numbers interesting to people. And of course, it's lunchtime. So I'm going to try something here. So if you look at 2020, my eyesight's not great, but you can see the shape of this curve, right? And what you see here in 2020 is $9 billion. That was the total state appropriation, right? And what you see here in 2024 is 13.9. If you're good at math in your head, that percentage increase is over 50. I think it's exactly 54. Now, it takes Common Core math, I think, to say, as the governor has, well, we're only going to grow spending, which he said, 2.2%. And I want to explain that disconnect today and also want to call out the conservative legislators for something they did, which was very good last session, and talk about how we need to do more of that. So 54% over 4 years, it's a pretty big number. Now that's the original appropriation. Some of that money carries over, meaning it's such a big increase, it doesn't all get spent. But what's happening and what has happened in Idaho and many states, virtually all of them, when COVID came about, we know that story and it's a pretty sad one. The state of Idaho was flooded with $22.9 billion. I have a document that shows that, and I'm happy to share that. And that's at all levels. So that included checks to business, to individuals, money to state and local governments. The point is that that's a very large amount of money. And one of the things that Ron alluded to, we have a problem with inflation. And partly that's driven, or largely, by monetizing all this debt. I mean, if you think about the state before COVID appropriated $9 billion, and then we got flooded with 22.9. It distorted everything. And one way to think about that, we do see a lot of projects that we like, water, roads, et cetera. But the problem is the government then competes for resources. And nationally, when you hear about the low unemployment rate, it's probably not untrue, but you might not also hear that the biggest growth in employment nationally is government, followed by healthcare and social assistance. So the government is borrowing, printing money, and then growing and hiring people. and that's inflationary. Of course, if you have a small business, they're competing for your hires. So I'm wondering if you can bring that back up and maybe scroll down a hair. Oops. I'll let him figure that out. So how is the governor able to make these claims that he's only growing spending a little? And it's something that I don't want to get into too much detail, but I'm going to provide some very simple examples. So he's able to do that because the state has several different funds: general, dedicated, and federal. And I think federal is pretty self-explanatory. It's money that comes from the federal government. General funds include monies supplied by your income tax, by sales taxes, by corporate income tax, by product taxes. And those generally are spent on functional things in government, including schools, the state police, etc. Dedicated funds would include money for fish and game licenses. And the notion there is, if you buy a fish and game license, all that money should go to fish and game. And it does. I mean, maybe there's a little bleed off, but essentially everything paid for a hunting and fishing license goes to fish and game. What the governor has done the last few years dramatically is he's taken general fund money and he's pushed it into dedicated funds. So if you think about it mathematically, very, very simplified, if I shift, which the governor is proposing doing, $780 million out of the general fund column into this dedicated fund, and I don't count it as expenses in the general fund, I can show a small percentage. And actually, this came up in JFAC. I'm going to give them some credit. They're asking to have it restated, adding it back. So what am I talking about shifted? This is the governor's recommendation. Fire suppression fund, transfer 17 million. Transfer to ITD, 302.8 million. Permanent building, 25 million. DEQ, 2 million. Water resources, 30 million. Local roads, 200 million. It's a long list. Now, some people might say that all this is good spending, or some of it is, and that's fair. But you can't have it both ways in life, or maybe you can, but he should call it what it is. He's transferring it from revenues to spend. Let's call it spending. If you're going to increase the spending 16 or 17%, say that. Own it, right? And then we can have a debate about, but to make this claim that we are the most fiscally responsible, I mean, I don't see that up there. Do you? I mean, that's a big. So in 2017, 7.6. I don't know how good my eyesight is anymore. Looks like 7.6. You know, that's almost a doubling. So it can't be both. Either we're growing spending a lot more and shifting the money around, or we're not. And we obviously are growing spending a lot. I do want to thank a lot of the conservatives in the legislature, and I want to explain A, why it's hard, and then B, what they've done. So we have a lot. I won't be able to name everyone, but I see quite a few senators and House members. Last session, a Medicaid bill came to the floor, House Bill 334, 4.691 billion. Not great at remembering names, but numbers I'm pretty good at. I know all the conservatives in this room voted no. Representative Tanner, among others, on JFAC, they worked really hard to get that number down several hundred million more. They were not successful, but the next bill that came, 369, is 151 million lower. And why? We can get all the arcane things, but what happened was a lot of people were automatically added to Medicaid during the COVID emergency, presumptive eligibility, and they were by law supposed to come off. Well, guess what? They also opposed the lower number, and I think virtually everyone in this room who's in the legislature did, House Bill 369. Now, the people who voted no, it's kind of an odd combination, but it was all the conservatives and then the Democrats and some Republicans who wanted more money. So they shouldn't be given credit because they actually said it. And what did they say? And you can go back and listen to the tape. There's going to be a big supplemental if we cut this. Well, guess what? go into the budget book. There's a $277 million reversion. It's on page 2-40. Go look it up. So the 151 plus the 277 was reduced from the original budget. If again, you can look in the budget book. The point is, we do have to push back. When you push back, it can have results. It's a lot of work. Of course, you take all the, the bric-a-brac, and that I think is going to happen this year. I mean, I have a good feeling that a lot of conservatives are not buying this 2.2%. I mean, just common sense. The governor listed all these things he's going to spend money on, give a pay raise, more benefits, and that's all going to only cost 2% more. All these initiatives, all the money spent on facilities, on roads, that doesn't really make sense. So I don't want to go on too much longer. I will answer one or two questions, just because when you throw out a lot of budget stuff, sometimes there are those sorts of things. But before that, let's have a round of applause for all the legislators in here who stuck to their guns and voted no on two big Medicaid budget blowouts. If there are no questions, not seeing any hands, then it is over. Are you going to introduce our legislators? I will turn it back to Brian, and you'll see me around the halls of the Capitol. I'll have numbers in my hand, and feel free to ask me any questions or reach out anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Fred. Even for people who are engaged, digging into those budget numbers can make your head spin. So I am really thankful for people like Fred and the rest of the policy team at Idaho Freedom Foundation for digging into it, explaining what the numbers mean, explaining where, some of the promotion of these budgets and these plans are really not telling you the whole story. Because it is really a complex issue, and I'm glad we can have, folks explain it so that we can understand exactly where our tax dollars are going, or where people want to send our tax dollars. Before we move on to the Freedom Caucus, I just want to let you know, in the back, we have some of the materials that Idaho Freedom Foundation has created. There's the Freedom Index. There's a card that tells you how you can donate. There's a card that tells you how you to get on the email list. If you would like to get updates, you can go to capitalclarity.com. You can do it right on your phone. And that's capital with an O, capitalclarity.com. You can sign up for the emails, but you can also, if you scroll down the page, there's a place where you can put in a suggestion for future Capital Clarity programs. Do you have some issue you want us to talk about? Do you have some, figure that you think would be a great guest to come and speak on some issue? Just put it in there, and the team will figure out how to make it happen. So next up are the co-chairs of the Idaho Freedom Caucus. The Freedom Caucus, I'm sure they'll explain the whole thing, but it's part of a network of legislators throughout the country who have joined together, state legislators, to promote issues related to freedom and liberty. And because there really is strength in numbers. The big groups, the big lobby groups, the big organizations, they have power because of numbers and because of money. And so, advocates for freedom and liberty need that sort of power as well. And I've been really excited to see what they've done over the last year here in Idaho and throughout the country. There are Freedom Caucus chapters in various other states like Arizona, like Wyoming. I believe Missouri just started one up in the last few weeks. So without further ado, Senator Tammy Nichols and Representative Heather Scott.
Welcome. So we kind of put this into two parts. We're going to talk a little bit about our vision, and I'm going to start with that, and then Senator Nichols is going to share a lot more about our details of our bills and introduce you to some of our members. So as our nation continues to decline, it seems like everywhere we look, people want hope. In the Idaho Freedom Caucus, we realize that true eternal hope comes from our Savior above. With 12 public members, we have 12 public members and many private members. We are committed to you to promote a free Idaho the best we can. We are working for an Idaho where God-given constitutional protective rights, God-given rights are protected by government, not granted by government. Where government is transparent, accountable, and responsible to your hard-earned tax dollars. In Idaho, where teachers will educate and challenge students, not indoctrinate them. Earlier this week, as Dr. Nates shared, we heard the State of the State address from the governor. Some cheered, but many were disappointed. Was there anyone other than the lobbyists and the special interest groups that were authentically excited about that? Well, of course, the Democrats. Let's not forget them. Our governor's proposed budget, as Fred has shared, is now $13.9 billion. That's 50% more than just 2020. Idaho took $22.9 billion during the COVID years, and they borrowed all that money from your children and the future generations. And that is actually in the language of the legislation. Currently, our budget is 43% federal money. And the governor's Idaho Works program, there's more and more new programs, more and more bloated bureaucracies, and more crony projects using more of your children's money. This is not a winning strategy for a sovereign state, and it certainly makes the governor sound silly when he says on one hand, he attacks the federal government. He actually said, quote, unbridled spending is crippling American families. While on the other side, on the other hand, he's pocketing our federal money as fast as he can. The bottom line is the governor has willingly jumped aboard an out-of-control federal spending train, and when that train goes over the cliff, it will take Idaho with it. Once our country becomes insolvent, the federal government will likely push a central digital currency and a digital ID system. And Freedom Caucus members want no part of it. We are willing to do everything we can to stop it. The Freedom Caucus understands that families are struggling with inflation and taxes. We believe that the citizens are best stewards of the money and their own earnings. We believe that your tax dollars should be spent responsibly, directed at fortifying the state for a future collapse. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of all the left's crazy ideas that we just keep reacting to. I'm tired of simply existing to speak out and try to slow them down and slow down the way this state is turning progressive. They're accelerating towards a Marxist future in this state and in the country at alarming speeds, which is good that you have the Freedom Caucus. The Idaho Freedom Caucus wants to go a completely different direction. We want to go towards liberty. He wants liberty too, or she. Liberty, truth, and human flourishing. As State Freedom Caucus members, we are in a unique position to bring real change to Idaho in the form of visionary legislation. We don't want to run, and we won't run legislation that continues to take us down a mundane road of mediocrity, where everyone senses something's not right, but we just kind of keep moving along. We can build a prosperous state without mortgaging our grandchildren's future. By staying true to our principles, we will make Idaho the ultimate haven for freedom and responsibility in America. Think about this. Imagine going grocery shopping and having an immediate 6% reduction of what you spend because there's no more grocery tax. Or using your own tax dollars towards an education you choose for your children aligned with your values. We should not be constantly worried about critical race theory and agendas being pushed on our children. Imagine government that actually has a contingency plan for not allowing busloads of illegal immigrants to show up in your town. Or a government that stands up for your medical freedom and civil liberties that will actually offer zero pushback, that will stop offering zero pushback to the top-down government mandates and Main Street agendas. You know, citizens shouldn't be worried about becoming a felon overnight because ATF has changed some rule and set up an unconstitutional rule. Our local communities should have the final say when they put in these big energy projects in our communities. We should not be given preference to these backdoor agreements that's happening right now. And then there's always the property tax. And I think that's the number one issue because that comes straight from our pockets. And I'd like you to imagine a state where you actually have money that you can retire and all your money's not going to taxes, or new families can buy houses without being taxed to death. Or maybe no property tax. You know, taxes put us in servitude, and that is where we are headed. So the Idaho Freedom Caucus, we have a better way. I know a lot of times people don't hear us because we're pushed to the, we're just pushed aside, but we have a different day. We have a better way, and it involves real reform, fiscal discipline, and not playing this tax shifting game that's currently happening in Idaho. We will stop reacting and we will start leading, offering legislation that offers new solutions to old problems, as well as attempts to look into the future and provide a roadmap for a resurgent Idaho. We will require, this will require active citizenship, and you will need to do your part, every one of you. We believe, as the Idaho Freedom Caucus, that we can return this state to a real Republican state with traditional family honoring state where citizens matter and the government serves the people. And I believe this vision is possible. So I know there's a lot of bad going on in society right now. Just remember, these are really exciting times. We are here for a reason such as this. And although our future may look bleak at times, nothing is too big for our God if we stand together. Over the next several weeks, many of our Freedom Caucus members are going to be attending the Capitol Clarity, sharing their bills. We hope you can show up and see them. And now our social director, Senator Nichols, co-chair social director, is going to come give you a lot more information. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Scott. I'm not really the social director. I will tell you that. I am very socially active though. And that's why she tells me that. But anyway, there are these cards that are on the back table, and I hope you'll all grab not just one, but several of them and give them to your neighbors and to your friends to let them know about the Idaho Freedom Caucus. And I'm just going to go over what we have on these cards. And I wanted to preface it, though, that it was all of the Freedom Caucus members that decided on what were important things for us to work on this legislative session. What were the things that we were hearing from our constituents about? And what were the issues that we could see that were pressing for the people in Idaho? And so this was an effort of togetherness to be able to get this because Freedom Caucus members come from all parts of the state, and not every part of the state is the same, but this is what we came up with. So first of all, we want to protect our constitutional rights. We believe that the Constitution is our foundation for our governmental process, and that without it, you end up with chaos. So it says we will defend all of our God-given constitutionally protected rights, including the Second Amendment, freedom of speech, health freedom, and the right to due process. Our second goal is fiscal responsibility, transparency, and accountability. We firmly believe in state sovereignty and minimizing federal dependency, as Representative Scott was talking about. We actively work to cut government bureaucracy, streamline agencies, and lower taxes for hardworking families and businesses. We are against forced digital currency and ESG scoring. We will work to safeguard election integrity. and oppose ranked choice voting, a scheme to transform Idaho's political landscape and hinder the voice of citizens. We strongly support stringent voter ID laws to ensure honest elections to safeguard our republic. And I have to just give a shout out really quick to Chairwoman Moon, because she is really harping on this ranked choice voting, and everyone needs to be doing that. Decline to sign, and don't let your neighbors do it either. Tell them it's not what they think it is. Okay, our next section is restore quality education. We support our dedicated education professionals who exemplify educating, not indoctrinating our children with extreme ideologies. We pledge to protect students' abilities to think and learn without bias, and will work to increase education freedom and choice for every Idaho family. Our next section is support and protect families and children. We cherish traditional families, children's innocence, and the sanctity of life. We're deeply concerned about the moral decline of society and will push back on racial gender ideology and the sexualization of our children. We are against the legalization of recreational drugs. We support our law enforcement officers and support our veterans. Our votes will align with the state and the U.S. Constitution, the Republican platform, and the Holy Bible. These are all very important things. Those are our foundations right there. And you know, when I first ran for office, my desire with deciding on bills, on if I was going to vote for them or not, was first of all, if they were constitutional. Second of all, how are they going to impact the people in Idaho? Third, did we need it? And fourth, what was it going to cost us? So these are our foundations to be able to utilize, and that's what we're using to be able to decide on bills, on if we're voting for them or not. And keep in mind, a lot of people get confused that when we have bills come before us to vote on, we have to vote on the entirety of the bill. We can't just say, oh, I like this portion or that portion, or I don't like this or I don't like that. We're voting on the whole thing. So there might be some good things in some of those bills that we do like, but there might be a lot of garbage that we really don't like. They do this at the federal level too all the time, and it's no different here at the state level. So just keep that in mind. We finish by saying, by staying true to these principles, we're on track to make Idaho the ultimate haven of freedom in America. And so please take these cards with you and give them out. On the back of it, we have, like Representative Scott was saying, we have public and private membership. And there's a reason that we do that. But I wanted to go ahead and just introduce our public members that we have. And if you're here, please stand up. So we have, of course, Representative Heather Scott. She's my co-chair. And then myself, we have Representative Jason Gallagher. We have Senator Brian Lenny. I think there he is in the back. Representative Mike Kingsley. He's a great one. He's not in here, but he's good. Senator Cindy Carlson. Representative Tony Wisnowski. Representative Elaine Price. Representative Dale Hawkins is in the back. Representative Joe Alfieri. Senator Glenita Zeiderfeld. And Senator Scott Herndon. And these are our public members that we have, both House and Senate, and they do an amazing job, and they all serve on different committees, and we are glad to have them there. And then we also have our director, Maria Nate. She's in the back, and she is amazing. One of the goals that we had as the Freedom Caucus, because we felt it was really important, is to become very socially active. And this was kind of pulling teeth for some, because some people don't want to be on social media. And yeah, Heather's raising her hand over there. But it's a necessary evil, unfortunately, to be able to utilize in today's modern society. And so we have been encouraging our members to get on social media. Now, you can find us right now on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. We are on X. We also have a Substack. That's kind of a new thing. It's kind of like a newsletter. So I encourage you to sign up for that. We also started on X, which used to be Twitter, what's called Assemble X. And it's a really interesting platform to be able to utilize. It's like having a town hall on social media. You don't see people's faces, but you hear their voices, and there's a lot of interaction. You can ask questions. There's a lot of information that's given out. There's links to different things. And we have people that participate from all over the country and all over the world. So we're encouraging people to go over to X, to Twitter X, I call it that, because that is, since Elon Musk took that over, it has changed it so dramatically. Facebook is just not the place to be anymore. There's so many problems with being censored on there still. Instagram's kind of along the same way. It's not as bad. I will post something on Instagram that I might get like 4,000 or 5,000 likes, and then on Facebook I get like 5. So you can really tell that there's a definite discrimination going on there. But go onto X and I know some of our people in here that are older than I am might not be comfortable with that, but I'm telling you, that is where the news is. That is where the information is. That is where the truth is getting out. So I encourage you to go on there, sign up for our Substack. You get emails, and it's like a newsletter, and it tells you everything that the Freedom Caucus, Idaho Freedom Caucus, is working on. So that's another really great way to follow us. And then we do have a website, idahofreedomcaucus.org, and most of that information is on this handout. I think we are going to go ahead and take some questions really quick. Brian, is that okay? Okay. Yeah. Would the Freedom Caucus members come up here? And we can take questions in regards to the Freedom Caucus or any specifics that you might have to any of our members. And if we want to just answer your questions, and we'll go from there.
So this is just for the social. People complained that if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or X, you can't hear the questions. So it seems silly because you can't hear it here, but people online will be able to hear this. The first question, actually, somebody in the chat asked, is there a way to get those cards to the far reaches of the state, to Lemhi County and out, and beyond?
Yes. So all of our members will have these, and they will be taking them back to their districts. And so if you're wanting extra cards, let your representative who's a member of the Freedom Caucus know, and we will be able to get those to you. If you don't have a member, we can mail them. I'm sure we would be glad to mail you some. So yeah, let us know.
I do understand why some of the non-public members want to be non-public, but could you give us an idea how many non-public members there are? No.
We actually do not. Yeah, we have no idea. It's one of those things where, if we told you, there might be some things that happen. But we keep all that information, and as you lovingly stated, the reasoning is that we want to keep that a little bit hidden. Strategic. It's very strategic.
Does the Freedom Caucus members have to vote 100%? Like maybe the board might tell them to, type of thing, or do they still have their own whatever their own self? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So no, we're the board. We have a lot of debate that takes place, and no, there does not have to be 100% consensus. And everybody still has the ability to vote the way that they want to. You will see some bills though that we do support as a caucus. It doesn't mean that everybody was in 100% agreement on those bills, but we do have some that are important bills to us as a whole. And so we will be supporting those together, but everybody still has their freedom to be able to vote per their conscience.
I just wanted to be able to say that on behalf of myself and maybe a few in here, we're really proud of you guys. I've been around a long time, and I've had an opportunity to meet almost every one of you.
And I know that you guys make your decisions based on the information that is in front of you. I know this is going to sound a little controversial. I'm a little shaky asking this in front of my friends, but as I travel the state, there's some confusion, and I would like you guys to address this on video so that people can hear this. I've been told by a lot of people that I meet that the you people are just towing the IFF line, and the fact that you will not actually vote your own conscience. Can you imagine Scott Herndon just towing the line of somebody else? I mean, I just can't even imagine that. So what I wanted to do is just to be able to have you guys clarify the fact that you guys, I know you guys all to be critical thinkers and to make your own decisions and things of that nature, but I wanted you to comment on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we do get that periodically. So I will state publicly right now, just in case no one has heard it, we are the Idaho Freedom Caucus. So there's a lot of tools at our disposal to be able to use, including the Idaho Freedom Foundation. And I'm grateful that we have these tools to be able to utilize. We still represent our districts and we represent our state as a whole. And what our desire is to do what is right for the people here and for our state, so that we can be prosperous, so that we can be free, and that we can do things that promote our Constitution, our party platform, exactly what I had already said before. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal. No one tells us how to vote. We decide that on our own. And like I said, we discuss a lot of things together to be able to figure out what is the right direction. Because like I said, when you have a bill that comes before you, you have to vote on the entirety of the bill. You don't just get to pick and choose. And so we discuss those things. And it's good to be able to get that feedback. It's good to look at the tools that we utilize, like the Idaho Freedom Foundation. We also use the ACU, which is part of CPAC, Club for Growth. I mean, there's a lot of great information out there. And it's like what any detective would do. You take all that information in, and then you figure out where you need to go with it. And so, yeah, we are the Freedom Caucus, and we are all independent in our thinking.
Hello, my name.
I'd like to add to that too briefly. Senator Nichols already touched on it briefly, but to that exact point, it's also worth noting that CPAC, who rates over 5,000 state legislators annually, they rate every state legislator in the United States. They come out with a rating, a scoring system, their own independent scoring system. I've never heard anyone accuse CPAC of being not conservative, but they come out with a rating and a scoring system after the fact, after the almost a year later, isn't it? So they just released their findings from 2023 a few weeks ago. And most or many of us were up in the upper 90s or 100%, according to CPAC, which is not the Idaho Freedom Foundation, as we all know. And many or most of us, possibly all of us, I don't have it right in front of me, got just a few weeks ago, received a Conservative Excellence Award from CPAC. We don't know what CPAC's going to rate, what bills they're going to rate. As Senator Nichols said, we vote for freedom and liberty. So, of course, liberty and freedom-minded organizations, we're all going to see things the same way. But I thought, for anyone accusing us of that towing the line thing, why does CPAC rate us pretty damn highly as well? So I think that's worth noting. So.
Hello, my name is Dr. Craig Schoberg. I'm out in Greenleaf. So the mission of two things. We've got to stop doing the circular firing squad in the conservative groups. Kent Marmon, Jordan Marks, both lost because there were 3 or 4 people. Some gal named Kayla Dunn disappeared after she reappeared out of nowhere and ran and broke it. And Jim Rice and, that 4-way boat up in District 9 where I am. Now we've got Democrat Abby Lee. So how do we get rid of these circular firing squad vettings where we're killing each other? We've got some great people running. We need to dissect it out so we get the person running like the Democrats are so good at doing. Second thing, I loved that little comedy skit with the game show you guys put together. That was phenomenal. a week before I posted, we need to do some ploys and songs and things that get people's spirit going in our direction, and getting the kids going, Tammy, that's so good. But that's starting there. They're not voting yet, but it's still the culture of our life. So we've got to protect our lives with how we're being depleted down. And those little vignettes are awesome. So if you guys can do more of those, that's super.
Perfect. I'm going to say just really briefly, and then I'm going to let my co-chair, Representative Scott, answer. We like to refer to ourselves as happy warriors. And so, yeah, I get it. And we're in a very polarized society, especially regarding politics. So unfortunately, it's part of the territory. But I'm going to let Representative Scott talk a little bit about that.
Thank you. Just to answer that briefly, it's going to have to be dealt with locally. It's the citizens that get involved that make a difference, that have influence over candidates. We can't tell anyone what to do or how to do, and it's not in our nature. We are all about independence and liberty. So I'm not going to tell anyone they should do this or do that. It's got to be happening in their district, and we are out of time. So thank you guys for coming. We'll all be around. If you have any questions for us, grab one of our cards and connect. Just to let you know, I call her the social director. She's also the co-chair, but she is the one. If you want to connect with us, talk to Tammy. She's got it all figured out. She's networking all across the country. So if you want to connect, Tammy, and thank you for coming today. Senator Nichols.
All right. Thank you again. We appreciate everybody coming. We appreciate the Idaho Freedom Foundation for hosting the Capitol Clarity, and we hope to see you around the Capitol this session. Thank you.
For those watching online, make sure you join us next week. Hey, Tammy.